Do you ever get overwhelmed with the amount of templates, methodologies, and tools that are circling around in HCD? Well, you're not alone. And in today's episode of Design Ahead, we're going to be taking a look at the forgotten art of simplicity and why it is absolutely essential to implement for the success of projects. So welcome back to Design Ahead with me, Jake Fernandes, and today I'm recording this from a hotel room in El Salvador, in San Miguel to be exact. And as I said in the intro, I want to be talking about simplicity. It's something that I've built the Design Ahead brand around. It's something that I am constantly creating new playbooks, frameworks, all around to try and promote this idea that you don't need 1,000,001 different templates or 101 different tools and ways of working that overcomplicate everything. The main message is that you should have a core toolkit that's easy to adapt on the fly as new situations arise. Yes, it is very easy to be caught up in the idea of, oh, I need this new template because I might face this situation in the future, or, oh, I've never looked at this before, so maybe I should try and add a new tool into my toolkit. When essentially what we are forgetting is that we have a core toolkit already that has got us so much success in the past. It can be adapted with just a little bit of an improvement on top of that, and we can face new situations that we've never encountered before with confidence when we know how to adapt what we already have. So let's take a little bit of a step back to begin with and just explain what we mean by simplicity. One thing I want to debunk immediately is that it is not about being basic. Oftentimes it's about understanding very complex things, very complex subjects, and being able to distill that to create a simple outcome. And we can split this idea into two halves. We can first talk about why it's important for your colleagues, users, and stakeholders, and then we can take a look at how it's impactful in your own work, in your own methodologies and toolkits. So many projects that we will face will be with very complex clients, for example, government organizations, financial institutes. These places have very complex processes for very good reasons, obviously. They're huge businesses that need to operate in a variety of different ways. So it's kind of on us to understand how complex they are, how we can start to break those down and make them more understandable for the people around us and ourselves as well. As HCD professionals, we are often involved from the beginning, from the discovery phases where we're trying to get to grips with who we're working with and the problem that we're trying to solve. And then we take that, we start to design those solutions and then feed that into the rest of the team, and namely the developers as well, to build those solutions and create real products at the other end. And we need to make sure that those solutions line with our users. Are they going to be completing work quicker or more efficiently? If they're customers, are they able to use our service effectively, check out and get their products at the other end easily? Whatever the metrics might be, we need to make sure that we are meeting them and we are maximizing them in terms of our user performance. But before we even get there, as I said, we need to get the buy-in from the team, we need to get the buy-in from the stakeholders. So being able to present our solutions in a way that is easy to digest, easy to visualize, and see how it's going to be an impactful solution at the other end, how we manage to achieve that on the steps along the way, the development process, the launch process, marketing potentially we may get involved in as well. Everybody needs to be able to see how this solution is going to work, and they're not going to be able to see that if we just throw a load of complexity at them and hope that they understand all of our inner workings. So the bottom line here is that we need to be able to communicate our vision effectively by using simplicity. Yes, it's going to be complex at times, but we need to just boil that down into a manageable, bite-sized format that people can take away, understand the vision, and then sign off at the other end. And the second half that I mentioned is actually about our own tools and methodologies, and I did allude to this a little bit in the introduction. So one of my biggest concerns is whenever I go onto LinkedIn or a blog that I follow related to HCD is that I will be bombarded with 5 new ways to run this type of workshop, or a brand new tool that's competing with Figma. And yes, there is definitely time that we need to set aside to investigate these things and see what is new and emerging. However, when we're working within project spaces, we do have to abide by very strict timelines more often than not. We don't just get to set aside a day or a few hours even to check out something brand new in the middle of, a design sprint. So that's why we need to really focus on what we already do well, our tools that are already at our disposal, the methods that we already implement, and just figure out, how can we tweak them? How can we adjust them on the go to adapt to these new situations that might come up? So for example, if we're a UI designer using Figma, we might have a template design system that has already achieved a lot of success in the past. We might then work with a client who's looking to build a brand new or a refresh of their design system. So brilliant, we've got a great template to already start with. We can start to build up that design system using that template, using the tried and tested methods that we already have. And then if there are gaps or anything new that we haven't covered in our templates that the client is then asking for or that we feel is very valuable, maybe it's a very complex checkout process that involves a lot of different actions across the way. Yes, our template might not have a ready out-of-the-box solution for it, but what we can do is see, right, how can we use A, B, and C to get to this point? Things that we've already got in there, ways we can adapt it and get that solution at the other end. If you run workshops as well, I can guarantee you've got core templates or things that you've used in the past for, stakeholder workshops, user interviews, even team co-creations. There's things that you've already got that can just be twisted, a couple of dials here or there, some language changes, some formatting changes, and hey presto at the other end, you've probably got a workshop template already set up for you that's ready for almost any eventuality. So just by sitting down and analyzing, the things that you've already got, the things that you can already do very well, there's a lot of impact in that because you can start to focus on that core offering, see how things can be adjusted, things can be changed as you go along, and any new situations that come up, you've already got something that just requires a little bit of extra time and effort to get to where you need it to be. It also helps us identify any gaps that we might have because again, even if we have a good solid foundation of tools and methods, there's going to be instances that will be brand new, especially with the emergence of AI and technologies that are developing. There's going to be a lot of gaps in our toolkit. So it's important again to sit down and analyze what we already have, what we can already achieve, but also the things that we might need to upskill and improve on. And that's where it's important to start doing our research and find new things that we can add into our toolkit rather than replace them. So let's talk a little bit about why simplicity wins. The first point is efficiency in decision making. As I mentioned before, we rarely get the time to set aside during our work days to research new methods or investigate new ways of working. And the bottom line is that we just don't have enough time within our projects. We're working to very strict deadlines. We've got people at the other end who are waiting for our designs or waiting to sign things off, and we might become a blocker in the process if we can't get those things done in the time allocated. So that's why it's important to make decisions quickly. And by quickly, I don't mean that we necessarily need to trade off accuracy or efficiency. It's about creating good quality outcomes in a short period of time. So if we're creating wireframes for a product or a solution, we've already got a repertoire of past experiences, of designs that we might have made for another client or templates that we use that we can definitely reuse. We can see the purpose that it's trying to fulfill, bring it forward, and then create those wireframes in an efficient and effective manner. That means we can get to sign off a lot quicker, we can stop holding up the development side, and the product is going to get shipped and built in the time that we predicted. With an asterisk, of course, when you get to development, there are so many issues that will arise that are unforeseen, but you kind of get the idea. So again, going back to that analogy I used before, instead of being like, right, we're designing a new checkout for this client, and I've never done this before, I might need to research how I can design this kind of checkout. Take a step back, look at what you've already got, look at what you've already done for other clients in the past, the templates, the things that you know how to use very well, and just see, right, how can I adjust these to get this end product? And 95% of the time, there's going to be something that you've already got that you can use for the situation, thus saving a lot of time, thus having happier stakeholders, happier developers, and getting that project moving along. The second point is one that I just alluded to there. It's easier to get buy-in from stakeholders. It comes back to that idea that if it's easier to understand, it's easier to sign off. If we create this crazy big diagram with all of the different parts of the puzzle and showing them how the lines interact and give them this crazy overwhelming thing, it's going to be very hard for them to sign off because they're probably not going to understand it and they're going to have a lot more questions than answers. But what we can do is, even if we can't reduce it to a more simple format, we can just take it in bite-sized chunks to explain exactly what the different processes are doing, how they then interact with each other, what the end goal is, and just kind of show the inner workings at a more minute scale. This is where the art of storytelling and taking them on a journey really comes into play. It allows them to really understand it. We work in stories in our heads anyway. It's a really good way of explaining things for people to understand, and Ultimately, it's just going to get the stakeholders on your side, it's going to get them understanding what's happening, and you're going to get sign off a lot quicker. The third point is to improve the user experience. I mean, this is the stuff that we do every single day. This is our bread and butter. Our mission is that users get from A to B with the least effort possible. So if we're providing them with solutions that are really complex and complicated, that's not going to achieve exactly what we planned. So we might be designing a dashboard and we feel like there's so much important information because we have a very complex user base that do a lot of different things. So we design something that has 20 or 25 different metrics and tools and little buttons and dials everywhere. But then that just ends up overcomplicating it for all of our users, and we have a product that is totally not user-friendly. So what we could do is simplify it. We can think, right, what are the most important metrics that we need to feature? Are there a top 5 or a top 10? You know, trying to take that down from, you know, the fictitious number of 20 that I've used there, just to say, right, how do we not overwhelm the users? How do we still get the key important details across, allow them to perform those tasks? And maybe there's a way that users can then customize that dashboard, or we could put those tools into another area for them to pick up as they see fit. And finally, it just helps align with time and budget constraints. As again, I've said this a few times already in this episode, but we just don't have the luxury of taking a day, taking even a few hours every week to train ourselves and learn new methods. And also, when we're designing, we might have this amazing idea in mind, and I know I've been guilty of this before and I've had to learn the hard way of having a brilliant product with loads of bells and whistles, maybe a really cool dashboard or loads of alerts that users can get, email notifications, and thinking about this whole amazing user experience. The problem with that is that we just won't have the time to build all of that in one go. If we're given 6 months to maybe build a MVP, we need to really be focusing on what the most important things are that we can then get delivered in that time frame. And again, it's being able to translate those ideas, those solutions to actionable things for developers. So we can see this vision, we're trying to build it, and we're then explaining it to the developers to say, right, what we need to build is a core set of tools for the users to come in and use. Here are the different tools. Here's how we imagine them working together. And if you do have good experience in HTML, CSS, or even just kind of understand how systems work in the back end, then you can translate those designs into a much more digestible format for the developers to understand and then build. And then if they're on board with it, the stakeholders can sign off and they can say, right, we are quite confident that what you've designed, the solution that we're going to go with, is going to be able to be built within those 6 months. So let's talk quickly about the 3 biggest misconceptions around simplicity. The first one being that simplicity could be seen as a lack of expertise or depth, and as I mentioned before, this couldn't be further from the truth. Simplicity requires expertise. It requires you to understand fully what the problem is, or a very complex toolkit that you might be using, and see how you can take a small part of that to adjust it and then get those desired outcomes. If we're working with a client who might be in finance, for example, we really need to understand the inner workings of their system to then provide a more streamlined solution that will be beneficial overall. But again, it's understanding that complexity and seeing how we can simplify that and provide something that's going to be easier for the users and also actionable within the time frame given. It really is a mark of mastery being able to do that. Getting really invested and understanding all of these complexities to then simplify them for everybody involved. It's something that if you have a lack of depth or expertise, you are not going to be able to perform. So quite the opposite. The second one is that overcomplication leads to missed opportunities. Again, similar to what I just mentioned, a lot of the time, if you're able to understand these complex problems, you can then provide simpler, more actionable outcomes at the end. These opportunities might minimize a lot of the workloads that people have, or they might minimize inefficient processes within a company. Simplifying often does help efficiency. And if we're going about our design process the right way, we will be investigating those very complex opportunities as well to see if they do weigh up well against the more simpler options, if there's a reason we need to maintain that complexity, or if we can go down the simpler route. So ultimately it's irrelevant. You know, these simplifications won't be missing out on missed opportunities. They shouldn't really be one in another. They should be both weighed up against each other to make the correct decision at the end. And the third thing is balancing simplicity with innovation. Again, very similar to the last one, I think that sometimes simplicity can drive innovation. It allows us to spend more time working on innovative features. You know, if we're getting rid of complexity in one area, it should provide new opportunities for innovation. So if we're stripping out all of the crap that doesn't need to be there, for lack of a better word, we can then focus, right, we've got this very streamlined approach now. What are the different things that we can build on top of this? How can we make it even more efficient? Or what are the opportunities for growth in the future that can come because of it? We get rid of the distractions, we focus on what truly matters. So ultimately, simplicity is a driver for innovation rather than a replacement for it. So some quick actionable steps that you can take to think about simplicity. First, I would make a list of all of the different tools, methods, templates that you already have in your toolkit. For me, I might say tools are Figma and Miro. Templates, I might have a design system template, a user interview template on Miro, and the other skills I know how to do, conducting user research, user testing, workshopping with stakeholders, for example. And then just sit down and analyze these. Make a list of the different things that you can do or the ways in which you can tweak them. So for design systems, I can work with clients who need something built from the ground up. I can work on adaptations. I can give them new components that they might not already have in their existing design system. I can create wireframes, prototypes. My core toolkit that I've got and my knowledge of how to use it is already going to get me so far in prototyping and wireframing. I can tweak my user interview template to become a user testing template just with some easy language changes and maybe some shifting of things around. And my stakeholder mapping template could become a solution mapping template, just to kind of give you an idea of the things that I can already tweak. And from this, you should start to see the different tasks that you can perform and the areas that you already cover, which will probably be in quite some detail. And also importantly, you can identify gaps. So what I would actually recommend doing is, popping these things into ChatGPT or Gemini and just getting some ideas of areas that you've not considered or things that might be harder to tweak and adjust for. One thing I would say, just as a word of caution, is don't try to over-prepare. Don't try to prepare for every solution in the world, because you might have 101 ways in which you prepared for solutions and then problem number 102 comes up that you don't have an answer for. It's just the awareness that you really need. It's, being able to take those opportunities to do some more research or find new methodologies that might be additional that you don't need to replace. And that is the bottom line. We shouldn't necessarily be replacing things unless we feel we really need to. If it's now a redundant solution, a redundant bit of software, for example, Adobe XD is now gone, so it's very, very much recommended that you move to Figma if you're still using that. But most of the time, we don't need to be replacing things. We don't need to be throwing brand new things in there. We just need a really good understanding of what we can do, what we already have, and how those things can be adjusted. But that's going to be it for today. So thank you so much for watching this episode of Design Ahead. As I've mentioned in the past episodes, and if you've been following us online, we've just launched our website with our first few offerings. We have our HCD Foundations framework, which is free for everybody. I would really recommend checking that out, whether you're a junior, graduate, midweight, senior, lead, whatever you might be. There is something in there, I truly believe, for everybody. And it's free of charge as well, so head on over to designahead.co.uk to sign up for that now. We've also got pre-registrations for our Slack community, so again, I would suggest checking that out, registering if you want to connect with other individuals within the HCD industry who are pioneers of simplicity as well. But for now, thank you so much for watching this episode. Make sure to subscribe and follow wherever you get your podcasts, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.